Final Fantasy VII may be 25 years old now, and gosh, that makes me feel my age, but I'm still seeing misconceptions to this day regarding an important aspect to the plot as people discuss it online. Specifically, this has to do with the relationship between Jenova, an extraterrestrial organism that crashed to the planet thousands of years ago and was at one point mistaken for a Cetra, and Sephiroth, the game's main antagonist and villain. And the misconception itself effectively goes along the lines of, despite the fact that at first it appears that Cloud and his party are chasing Sephiroth across the world map, it eventually is discovered that no, they are chasing Jenova, and it is Jenova who is leading Cloud to the northern crater, where Sephiroth has been kept in stasis and is only awakened towards the end of the game. My friends, this is simply not the case at all. While it is true that the manifestations of Sephiroth throughout the bulk of the story are indeed manifestations that are physically made up of Jenova cells, it is not, as commonly assumed, A, Jenova in control of these appearances, or B, Jenova and Sephiroth somehow working together. As Professor Hojo eventually realises himself, everything that occurs is all Sephiroth's doing. You see, the thing is, once Sephiroth escapes the live stream that he has been traversing for the last several years, by this point he is so powerful in his mind, he is so extraordinarily powerful in his will, that he is now able to manipulate the Jenova reunion and take full control of it for himself. And just in case you need a reminder on the Jenova reunion, this is the theory proposed by Professor Hojo that suggests that if cells from the main Jenova body are separated from it, then they have an innate instinct to return to it automatically. And he tests his theory by injecting Jenova cells into poor and unfortunate test subjects, most notably those poor residents from Nibelheim. Now, what he expected was for the test subjects to congregate at the Shinra building, which is where he was keeping the main body of Jenova itself. But what actually happens, of course, is that the body of Jenova breaks free of its containment, and it, along with the various Sephiroth clones, which is the name given to these test subjects, all start congregating at the northern crater, which is where Sephiroth himself is located. So Hojo is happy that his reunion has been proven, his reunion theory. He just didn't expect it to play out the way that it did because he didn't know about Sephiroth being alive still and taking over the reunion process. And just a brief tangent to correct another misconception about Jenova. Now, Jenova is not a female Cetra. It is not part of the ancient race of which Aerith descended from. Jenova is indeed a shape-shifting extraterrestrial that came crashing to the planet thousands of years ago in order to consume its natural resources. For those of you who are fans of 80s horror, just think The Thing, because that's basically what Jenova is. However, when it came to the planet, it didn't count on meeting the Cetra, who weren't best pleased to greet it and went to war with Jenova. And it was during this time that Jenova would deceive the Cetra by becoming them. It would transform into them in order to take over and destroy their race. But fortunately, the Cetra were able to imprison Jenova, and it was during this time that Jenova was transforming into a female Cetra that it was captured by them. And this was the form that Shinra discovered it in thousands of years later. That's why it's spoken of with female pronouns and names such as Mother. But obviously that isn't its true form, the likes of which is completely unknown. Anyway, so as far as Sephiroth's body is concerned, he continues to congregate his own cells and reform it in the Mako-rich environment within the northern crater. But his will is so strong, it is so powerful, that he effectively uses his connection to Jenova to control all of the Jenova cells, including the reunion process, and that's why it is Sephiroth that is breaking the bulk of the body of Jenova out of its Shinra containment. It is Sephiroth that breaks Cloud out. He's got Jenova cells in him as well, don't forget. Cloud out of his containment at Shinra, along with the Avalanche party, and it is Sephiroth that is controlling the Sephiroth clones in order to bring them all to himself at the northern crater. It is Sephiroth that taunts Cloud throughout the course of the adventure. It is Sephiroth that murders Aerith. He is just doing so using the Jenova cells that he is manipulating and transforming them into his image. Again, I do want to clarify, this has been made clear by Square themselves. Jenova is not in control, has no control over any of these things that are going on. They are not working together, Jenova and Sephiroth, as so often people assume. This is solely Sephiroth's doing. Hojo himself explains it very simply for us at the Whirlwind Maze when he says the reason why he was mistaken and that the Jenova body moved away from the Shinra building was because it was all Sephiroth's doing. That was a direct quote from Hojo himself. Now you may think, well, it's possible that Hojo was mistaken here. Well, he had been mistaken up until this point. This is the moment of clarity when he realises what the truth of the matter actually is. And even Cloud himself recognises that he wasn't pursuing Sephiroth for retaliation, which was the main narrative that had been assumed up until this point, but rather it was Sephiroth that was summoning Cloud because of those Jenova cells in his body. And so for sure, the game itself does make it clear that Sephiroth is the one in control of this process. But if you need something more, then you can look to other sources that are official from Square themselves, such as the Ultimania for Final Fantasy VII. This was written by those that created Final Fantasy VII, that made the story, and they clarify in the Ultimania that it was Sephiroth that was able to call Cloud, the copies, and the Genova's body together to unify the reunion. So everything that's occurring throughout the game is Sephiroth's doing, not Genova's. Now, of course, how things are going to be playing out in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and beyond, we're just going to have to wait and see. I mean, Square may take things in a different direction, of course. But whatever direction Square are going in with the story into the future, I think we're going to be able to enjoy it more and get the most out of it if we have a good understanding as to the story of the 1997 game, especially with regards to a major plot point revolving around Sephiroth, since he is still a major character in the remake project. But I do hope this little explanation just helps to clarify how things were playing out here, because as I say, there does seem to be some confusion even to this day regarding what exactly is going on in terms of Cloud and that chasing Sephiroth throughout the game. So thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I will be covering all of the Final Fantasy VII projects going forward, so please do stick around to be notified of future content, and I'll see you next time. Take care, folks.